Hey YouTube, JP Dillon. Today we're going to discuss refoaming. Now, as a lot of speakers age, the polyurethane foam surround that holds the cone in place begins to deteriorate, and it gets soft and gooey or brittle and breaks apart. And I'm going to show you the basics of how to refoam without shims. Let's go ahead and wait for the phone. Alright, so anyways, there are many different ways you can do it, and it really depends on the construction of the speaker. Largely dealing with the gap, the air gap between the voice coil and the magnet. In order for a speaker to work successfully, it has to ride parallel to the air gap so that it can travel up and down, in and out, whatever you perceive the motion to be. And the foam surrounding the spider helps keep it parallel. Now, if you've got a really loose and sloppy gap, like these older Advent drivers have, they're very sloppy, you can usually do it by feel with the use of a kinesthetic memory. Just tilt it until you feel it stop, tilt it back till you feel it stop, find the center point, and then do the same for the other axis. Now, if you've got a pesky one that's really tight, then you're going to need a shim or some way to stabilize the voice coil. Now, some people will use a regulated power supply, much like this old Radio Shack adjustable 12-volt 1-amp power supply. You keep it at about 4 volts and it holds the voice coil up. Now, that's all fine and dandy if the spider and the manufacturing of the cone means that it sits symmetrically in the air gap to begin with. However, if you've got one that's poorly manufactured, cheap, or that just has a defect, oftentimes the cone will not sit properly in the air gap, and you'll have rubbing, which one can easily check just by taking a starfish and moving the cone without any surround on it. The third thing is shims, and that usually requires removal of the dust cap and installation of shims, which I will not go over in this video. That will be for another time and another style of woofer to do. Today we're just going to work on the base ones of doing it by feel. So the tools that I recommend you have are an X-Acto knife. Doesn't have to be clean or pretty, just has to work, and preferably a cold chisel. And the cold chisel will be for going around the edge of the basket, and the X-Actos will be going around the edge of the cone, and I'll show you how to remove the garbage here. We'll just do one at a time. So let's get set up and let's go ahead and proceed. Okay, so here we are. I'm just going to take my hands and very carefully start to peel away what I can of the old surround. This one's starting to go on and get a little gooey, and we're just going to peel this off here. Don't let this fall into your carpet or get rubbed into anything. It's really quite disgusting and difficult to get out. Alright, so now that you've got the majority of it, take your X-Acto. And I like to kind of hold the cone up a little bit with my fingers as I do this. And you want to stay within the confines of the area where the surround is attached. And right now, you're just going to get all of the nasty stuff off of here. You don't have to be thorough yet. We're just going to get the majority of this stuff off. It's very important that the surfaces be absolutely clean and true before you install the new surround. Otherwise, you'll have nothing for the glue to stick to. Now I'm going to go around the edge of the lip of the cone and clean away any bits of glue or old surround or debris. And don't be afraid to use your hands if you have to. You're going to get messy in this exercise, so just deal with it. Now, if you've got an X-Acto with a slightly sharper blade, then what you do is go around the edge. This will take you a little more time. And scrape up any remains of the glue that may still be there. Now, some people will say, well, this goes a lot quicker if you use a solvent or something like that. And yeah, that's true, it does. But also remember that this is a paper cone. A paper composite cone will absorb the solvents and will make the cone softer around the edge, which means that you're compromising the rigidity and weakening the structure. So don't do that. Just scrape it away. It's going to take some time. Just deal with it. I go around with my finger and make sure there's no loose particles. Make sure it's absolutely smooth, no sticky, no glue residues left. So that's your cone. Now what we want to do is take our cold chisel and we want to go around the edge here. Now if you have a whetstone, that's helpful because then you can sharpen this and make it a little bit easier on yourself. I'm just going to go around the edge. And again, we're just going to make sure that none of the old remnants of glue or surround are left. As speakers go, Advents and Boston Acoustics and EPIs are all very easy speakers with big gaps and lots of room for error. So if you're just starting out, those are probably the best things to play with because they are the easiest to refoam if you're just starting out. That way you can kind of get a feel of how to do it, or find some, crummy speakers at a yard sale that you just don't care about. And you do an experiment and you see how well you do, and if you're good at it, then you do more speakers. We're almost done with this one. And again, I'm going to go around with my finger and feel for anything and get any remaining pieces off of the frame. Just make sure it's absolutely smooth. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and dump out my remains of old surround. Okay, so there's our speaker. Nice and prepped. You can see the surfaces are all clean and shiny. Run my finger around, it doesn't catch on anything, so that's good. Now, at this point, it is up to you whether you want to do it by feel or whether you want to do it by shim or by whatever. If you're going to do it by feel, the best way to describe it is that as I move this out, you can see that it has a sweet spot. This is tilt to one side, tilt to the other side, tilt forward, tilt back. And your job is to find the sweet spot and memorize it. And you can kind of, this one's nice because it just sits perfectly inside the air gap, and it's not skewed to one side, there's no defect in it. But then you have to worry about another thing, which is spider sag. If the spider sagging and the cone sitting down here, you're going to have to hold it up and struggle with it to get the surround attached. So we're going to shoot for a worst case scenario. We're going to say you don't have the power supply and you don't have a cone that sticks up. So this one sags a little bit, so that will help me there. Now as far as materials, if you're a wholesaler, I suggest talking to the people at MWA Speaker Parts in Arizona. If you've got a wholesale license, they'll sell to you. But if not, and you're like me, you go through Springfield Speaker Repair, Simply Speakers, Speaker Exchange, all of which sell really high quality surrounds, and they know which ones to get. So I've gone to Springfield Speaker, and I've gotten 2 8-inch foam surrounds, which are for this woofer. You can go ahead and check your clearances, but as we can see, that fits almost perfect. If I line it up with the old line on the cone with the glue, everything looks really nice, so we know that that's going to work. And there's two types of adhesive you can get with the kits from Springfield Speaker. One is clear and one is their professional black. And I like the professional black stuff because it dries very quickly, it's very strong, but it's very flexible. So what I'm going to do, and you can either start by applying a bead of glue around the edge of the surround, or you can do it here, assuming that you've already checked what the clearances and stuff are and how much it's going to stick out. I like doing it on the surround because it's a little bit easier for me and because I have a little more control of the bead. So I'm just going to go ahead and lay down a bead about midpoint of the surround. You don't want to use very much. This stuff is very, very strong, and a little bit goes a long way. And that way your refoam job looks really clean. And I'm going to do this one side at a time. So I've got the little bit of glue on there, and I'm just going to go ahead and lay it down right around where the old surround sat and center it as best as possible. Now what I'm going to do is lift up on the cone and kind of hold it here. It's okay if you rest it against the magnet to help it stay there. And I'm very carefully just going to tamp this down with my finger to get the glue to set. This is where your patience will pay off. Just go slow, tamp down the edges. This stuff sets in a couple minutes, so it's not going to take long. That's why I like the black stuff versus the clear stuff, because the clear stuff takes a little bit longer to set up. And as long as you're careful about the application, it's not going to make a big mess. You can see here that no glue is oozing out of the surround, and it's adhering, and it's starting to look like it's flat. There's no ripples. If you see ripples, it's not adhering to the cone. Tamp it down. So we're just going to go around the edge a couple more times. I'll wait about another minute or so, and then we'll test and see how flat it lies. This is the boring part. Bear with me. So I'm just going to go ahead and let this down. So here's what I mean by the sweet spot. If we push in this direction, it sticks and there's rub. If we push in this direction, there's rub. But between the two, we have movement. Likewise with this, we have rub here, we have rub here, but in the middle. So you kind of want to eyeball it and get it in the dead spot of the middle and get a feel for that. This one sits pretty straight, so that's good. If it doesn't sit straight, you're going to have to mess with it, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. Now that you've got the surround adhered to the cone, just do a check and run your finger around it, watching the lip to see if it moves. If the lip moves on the cone while you're doing this, it ain't dry yet. So just give it a little bit. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is lift up on this a little bit. And this is where it requires a little bit of dexterity. Now, if your surround is dry, this is easier, but if it's not and you're impatient, you're going to have problems. So just wait for it to dry. I'm going to go ahead and peel this up, and we're going to apply a small bead right behind where the lip of the edge of the basket is. So kind of like right here, kind of midpoint where the surround would sit. And again, not very much, because you don't want it to ooze out and make a big ugly mess. So I'm just going to lay down a bead here. I'm sorry if you can't see this very well, but I'm trying my best. And I'm going to go back here, lift up on this, and keep going. It's really helpful to have these little applicator bottles. You can buy these with the glue that you buy from Springfield Speaker. I think their kits come with a tube of it. Either way, an applicator is necessary. I'm just going to lift this up here again. Lay down some more glue. This is the this next part's going to be the part where your patience pays off. Alright, so quick check around, make sure that I've got glue everywhere, all the way around the perimeter. Looks like I do. Okay, so now, about the sweet spot. I'm going to use my hand and feeling. I'm going to feel for that sweet spot between the middle of all the axes. And then when I find that sweet spot, I'm going to press down slightly with one hand, and then grab one side of the surround and press it down to the basket, and then very quickly come down to the other side and press it. That's going to get the glue to start setting, and then while all that's happening, I very lightly tap on the edge of the cone to see if there's a clacking sound, which would tell me that I'm off axis. But right now there's no clacking sound. So now I'm going to go ahead and squeeze down the other two sides. Got a little dribble over here of glue. Got to remember to kind of stay clear of that. And then I'm going to lightly press here and here and listen for rub. And if you apply equal pressure on all four sides and you don't get rub, then you're pretty much smack dab in the center. Obviously, if I press here and I get rub, I need to move the cone a little bit this way by grabbing it and tilting it, or any of the other sides, move in the opposite direction. Now, if this is your first time doing this, you probably will make a mistake. I remember years ago when I started doing this that I did make mistakes. But once you feel that it's seated properly, go ahead and use your thumbs, work around and press down, tamp it down, and get the glue to set. No rub. That's great. Now, on a side note, these woofers did not come to me with a trim ring on them. Whether somebody removed them or they just simply didn't have them. If you had to remove your trim rings, after all this is set up and after we cut out the holes for the screws, that would be the time you'd lay a bead down on top of this part and then put the trim ring down, oftentimes flip it over and use the weight of the speaker to help set the trim ring in place. But on this video we will not have trim rings to mess with. So if you do, I apologize for that. But this is just supposed to cover the aspects of refoaming. This is almost dry, or at least it's tacky enough to the point where it's set. So, with your sharp X-Acto again, now what I want to do is go around where the screw holes are, and I want to cut out the foam. Oh yeah, be real careful, don't stab your work that you just did. Short strokes and be patient. I almost just destroyed what I was doing. So just be real careful. And you can see there that we've cut out an opening here. Now the reason why you do this is because if you don't, when you screw the securing screw down to the cabinet, the head of the screw will grab the surround here and it will tear it. And you'll usually make a big rip here, or you'll tear this loose from the basket, and then you'll have a nice hole in your work. So don't do that. Just go ahead and very patiently and carefully cut out the opening where the screw is going to sit. Some manufacturers even had washers that would sit on top of here so that the screw wouldn't tear the surround if the screw had to sit on top of the surround. Let me go ahead and cut that one out. We got one more to do. Now I noticed here I don't know if you can see that, but right there, see how it's starting to peel up a little bit? Get on top of that, tamp that down. That can happen if you use too much glue or if you're just not paying attention. But for a good couple minutes, check on that and make sure that nothing's peeling up. Alright, so we got the holes all cut out. Very nice. So I can push up from underneath the cone. I don't get rub, and I can push down from the top and I don't get rub. I can go up and down and up and down, and it's quiet and it's clean. So this one's done. That is refoaming a speaker. And again, one's by Advent, EPI, Boston Acoustics, all have really large voice coil gaps, and they're easy to refoam by feel. So the next video I'll work on will be with a speaker that has a tight gap, and we'll use a power supply to hold it in place. And then eventually, when I find some really tight ones like Altex or JBLs, we'll do ones with shims. Now I have JBLs that I can do without the shims and a power supply, but it's a little more tedious work. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed watching the video. Hope this is useful to you. If you're just starting out refoaming a speaker, hopefully this will be of an educational use to you, and you can learn how to do it yourself. Save you some time and money. Also the satisfaction of going, hey, I fixed my speaker. So thanks for watching the video. More stuff to come soon.